Back in 2012, I purchased this land, which is a little bit over 3 acres, 3.2 acres to be exact, and I purchased it for $2,000. When I first found out about it, I contacted the realtor that represented the people that wanted it for sale, and it was originally, the original asking price was $16,000, and I thought that was a little steep for out here. I was way out here in the country, and there's even like a pig farm a half mile away, so if the wind changes directions, it's not all that pleasant. I came out here a few times before I actually was serious about buying the land, and I walked through it, and it was pretty rough. It's just raw land, and I noticed that the woman who lives down the road was outside, so I went over there and talked to her, and come to find out that she knew the people, the two brothers who owned the land since the early 90s, when this land was actually pretty much plowed. It used to actually, there's a fence that runs through, and it had a stream that went through it, and it had livestock here. And the place had pretty much grown since then. And the two brothers that owned the land had inherited this piece of land from their grandfather. And she overheard a conversation at church, that she went to the same church as these people. And they were basically saying they just wanted to get rid of the land at any cost. They don't care. They just don't have any use for it. They've been paying taxes for it like over 25 years. So armed with this new information, I decided that it'd be a good idea to haggle a little bit. So long story short, I got them down from $16,000 to $2,000. Same is true for a piece of land that I just purchased in Wilmington. You guys may have saw a few videos ago where our friend Chris Strathy and I, we started building, we were going to start building a cabin that I'll be living in full time, a 400 square foot cabin. And the piece of land that I purchased there, I purchased it for much more, $51,000, but I ended up purchasing it for about half the price of lots around it, because the prices there in Wilmington, North Carolina are pretty high because it's right next to the coastal. A lot of people are flooding into the area because it once was a small town and now it's big. So I wanted to share those quick stories because today I want to talk to you about finding cheap land. It's something that a lot of people who live in a tiny house struggle with. It's not a lot of fun to pay more for land than you've paid for your tiny house itself, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. First and foremost, the quickest way to find cheap land is to be willing to live outside of the city. The piece of land that I just purchased recently for my cabin is outside of the city, but it's still maybe 1 mile from the city limits. And the good thing about that is the land is cheaper, and not only that, taxes are a lot cheaper. Recently on Tiny House Listings, we started allowing parking listings on the site. So there's land that's for lease and for sale. Some of them are owners that just want to make a little bit of extra money by allowing people to park tiny houses on the land, and some of them are realtors that own cheap property, and tiny houses are permittable on that land. So yeah, you should definitely go to tinyhouselistings.com and click on browse, and then you can do by category, and then filter it by just parking. Another resource that I love is a website called landwatch.com. And the reason I like that is because you can filter by so many things, by county, by location, by exact size, by price, all the things that you want to filter by if you plan to put a tiny house on it. And going into zoning real quick, if you're planning to build a small cabin or something like that that's going to be built up to your state's code, finding land is much easier. Now, if you're looking to purchase land where you just put a tiny house and park it on there, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because a lot of municipalities don't allow tiny houses that are mobile, or you'll have to jump through a couple hoops. And the reason it's more difficult to put a tiny house on wheels in many locations is because municipalities just don't allow it. And the reason is they want homes that are on permanent foundations. But that still doesn't mean that you can't. Like, there's thousands of people living in tiny houses now legally. So don't buy into the lie that there's no parking for tiny houses. So yeah, Landwatch is a good one. With the piece of property that I found myself that I purchased for the cabin, I actually had my friend that's a realtor that went out there and was looking around trying to find land based on the criteria that I gave him. And I found that piece of land that ended up being a really, really good buy through him. So having a realtor help you find a cheap piece of land for a tiny house is also not a bad way to go. Another place I really like to look for land is Craigslist. In the housing section, you can find a lot of land on that website as well. And another place that you might not know about is eBay. You can find and buy land on eBay too. And a lot of times you can search by like rural areas. Yeah, I've seen some really good deals on eBay. But the key overall, no matter which source you use to find cheap land, more than likely you're going to be able to find a cheap piece of land outside of the city. Sometimes you may have to go a little bit farther outside of the city. Like for example, here in Wilmington, North Carolina, there's small cities surrounding it like Leland and other places. If you go just a little bit beyond those cities, the price of the land falls dramatically. And the same is true everywhere. But if you're one of those people that has land for rent or for sale and a tiny house can be parked on it, definitely click on the link below in the description and post it to the Tiny House Listings website. It'll help a lot of people. We're trying very much to make tiny house listings the central place for cheap land that you can park a tiny house or a bus or alternative living space on. So anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.